Hi, welcome to Orchids with Barney. This video pairs with the previous post I put on, which is about monopodial orchids, and which is one of the two main growth habits of orchids. This video is about sympodial orchids, which is the second of the two main growth habits. So I'm going to start with this slipper orchid, Phaeophyllum, which if you watch the monopodial orchid video, it looks like it could be monopodial because you've got this fan of leaves, so you've got the oldest leaf, and it develops leaves left, right, and that's the newest leaf emerging, and then another leaf will be produced to the right and then to the left. And so it looks like it's a monopodial orchid growth habit, but it's not. It is a sympodial orchid. And the reason you can tell this is on the older growth, you can see that this older fan of leaves here, it terminated because there's a flower spike in the middle there. And that flower spike, when it develops, means that this older fan of leaves here is done. It will not produce any new leaves on this fan. It can only produce a new shoot at the base, which will develop into a new fan of its own. So when these sympodial orchids flower, that particular growth they're flowering from terminates and a new growth has to develop from near to the base. So you can see that it's quite tightly clustered, that the new fan developed from the base of the old one, and it's growing up. And it will develop a flower spike of its own, which will develop out of the center in due course when this fan reaches maturity. And new fans will develop from the base of this plant. If it's a healthy plant, it might produce more than one fan, and so you get a kind of increase in flowering, because if you have two fans developing next, then you get two flower spikes. So these sympodial orchids, each growth will terminate usually at flowering, or if it's a younger plant it may not flower on those growths, but a mature plant will terminate with a flowering and new growth develops from the base. So a more typical sympodial orchid is this Cattleya. So this is Cattleya triumphans, which is a hybrid, and it's a younger plant which I'm growing up to flowering size. And the thing with these sympodial orchids is they tend to have a growth direction across the pot. So these are the oldest growth, that's the smallest leaf, that's the oldest growth, and then we've got the next growth, next growth, next growth, and then we've got the youngest growth. And you can see the youngest growth is the biggest one. On a mature sized plant, each growth tends to be the same size, and each growth will flower. Now, what happens with these is there's a little section of the stem here which connects this pseudobulb to the previous growth. And so that bit of stem, which sometimes grows completely horizontally, sometimes it's slightly upwards, but we call that bit of stem the rhizome. And then it can be quite short, it can be quite long depending on the plant. And that rhizome has a direction, so in this plant it's growing towards the right across the pot. And so this growth, you can see it grew a bit of rhizome, and then you have the upward part, which is the pseudobulb, which is part of the stem. And at the top of the pseudobulb, we've now got the leaf above. And you can see here, that little nubbin, that potentially could flower. I don't think it's going to on this particular plant, but that's the point of origin where the flowers will arise. Usually Cattleyas have a green sheath, which signifies it's going to flower. Sometimes they don't have a sheath, but that's where the flowers arise. But this growth is basically finished. All it's happening now is it's flushing out a bunch of roots from the base of the stem, so it's from the rhizome and the base of the pseudobulb at the bottom of the rhizome here. And what will happen next is a new shoot will develop from one of the eyes. They're called little eyes, the growth points at the base of the pseudobulb, and the eyes will develop this way. So you'll get a bit of rhizome, and then you get the upward growth, pseudobulb and leaf. And then when that all matures and grows roots, etc., it will produce more growths in the same direction to the right. They'll grow up, etc., and then the next growth might be over the edge of a pot. So you'll find in a few years these grow over the edge of a pot, so you need to repot them. So this is a sympodial growth habit, which means each growth, basically you get termination of each growth point, and then new growth needs to develop from the base. So they tend to grow sideways across the pot. And if you're lucky, you'll get a couple of growths, and so then you'll get kind of two growth points, and then your plant fills out the pot a bit better. You might get multiple flower spikes from the different growths, and then when you come to divide it, when you repot, you can often get more than one plant out of that. And when you do repot, so let's say you've got a bunch of new growths here, what you'll do is you'll chop off the older growth. You generally can get rid of that, or you can keep it and pot it up, and it'll hopefully send out new shoots. But what you're going to keep, you would move the oldest growth that you have on that to the back of the pot, so the younger growths can grow out to the side for a few years before you need to repot again. And I just want to finish this by showing you the flowering of, this is Brassavola grandiflora, and you can see the point of origin of flowering. That is the leaf. The leaf meets the pseudobulb. It's not very developed pseudobulb in this species, and you can see the flower spike has developed. There are other sympodial orchids like oncidiums, for example, which they can sometimes flower at the top of the pseudobulb, but typically if you've got a round pseudobulb at the bottom and it's all leafy, a flower spike will develop from the base of the pseudobulb. But either way, it's sympodial because when that pseudobulb has matured, flowered, it can't grow anymore. It has to produce a new growth from the base, so they grow sideways across the pot. And you can see on this one that the growth habit is its new growth is growing to the right as you're looking at it, and so eventually it'll grow over the edge of the pot this way, and then I'll need to repot it. So that's sympodial orchids. This is Orchids with Barney. I hope you found the video useful. Do watch the one on monopodial orchids if you want to learn a bit more about how orchids grow. Happy growing, thanks for watching.